The USS Ronald Reagan, like a giant mechanical beehive deploying swarms of the world's most deadly combat aircraft. A fully armed city of 6,000, this supercarrier is an intimidating presence, built to serve and protect. So cozy on up to this 88,000 metric ton security blanket to see what it takes to run the US Navy's newest show of force. The USS Ronald Reagan. Named for a president known as the Great Communicator, this ship communicates one of his most well-known philosophies loud and clear. Peace through strength. A lot of strength.
I love it. It's a new ship. We're the new kids on the block. We have nothing to prove because we're the best so far, and I stand by that.
This new kid on the block actually does have something to prove. The USS Ronald Reagan and its crew must prove to US Navy brass that it's worthy to go into service. This is an exclusive look at one of the biggest milestones in the Reagan's coming of age. They call it Flight Deck Certification, which is the final rubber stamp that the Reagan needs before being put into service. Among crew members, there's a high level of anticipation.
I felt like a school kid going to his first day of school when I walked up to this ship and got on board for the first time.
The USS Ronald Reagan is the 9th Nimitz-class aircraft carrier to be built. The Nimitz-class carriers are the largest carriers on Earth, and this one is the most remarkable among them.
All of the latest improvements have been put on board this ship.
Those improvements don't come cheap. You're looking at $4.5 billion US dollars worth of boat. That's billion with a B. With a carrying capacity of up to 85 combat aircraft, the Reagan can protect the United States from some serious military harm. Towering 20 stories above the waterline, the Reagan's soaring height is dwarfed by its enormous expanse from stern to bow. At a whopping 333 meters long, it's like taking the Empire State Building on an ocean cruise. 2 onboard nuclear reactors provide enough power for the Reagan to operate at sea for 20 straight years without ever having to refuel. Not that the Navy would ever want that to happen.
Boy, that would be kind of hard, wouldn't it? 20 years at sea, get pretty lonely.
You might be lonely, but you'd be well taken care of.
The ship is very much like a city. We have a postal system, we have a garbage division, we have all the things a small city has, and we keep it going.
Speaking of cities, you could put the entire population of Aspen, Colorado on this boat with room to spare. The Reagan can actually house over 6,000 people. The Reagan even has its very own zip code. It can store enough food and supplies to sustain its population for up to 3 months. There are 30,000 light fixtures and 1,400 telephones. 2,100 kilometers worth of cable and wiring adorn the passageways. When the Reagan throws its weight around, look out. When carrying at full capacity, the Reagan has a displacement of 88,000 metric tons, which means when floating, it displaces 88 million kilograms of water, about 28.7 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Talk about parting the seas. It's a lot of ship built for one sole purpose.
Our mission is to be a combat airport.
The advantage of having a floating naval airbase is simple. It's free to park wherever it wants in international waters, which gets it pretty close to just about any conflict on the planet. It's a ready-made combat base. Wherever it goes, its mission is the same, to launch and recover planes as fast and safely as possible. No questions asked, no permission required. Ultimately, everything that happens on this ship, from deep below decks to high atop the tower, is in support of this. Orchestrated mayhem on the flight deck.
Aircraft carrier is about 4.5 acres, and it probably is the most hazardous 4.5 acres in the world.
A place where exact precision tames violent potential.
Things can change pretty quickly up there.
A place where readiness requires total awareness.
But you lose focus for a second on the flight deck and you're going to be hurt.
When flight operations are in full swing, there can be as many as 450 personnel on the flight deck. And you'd better be in the right place at the right time.
If you're not where you're supposed to be, someone's going to tell you in a real hurry, and there's been times people will go out there and grab you and drag you back to where you're supposed to be, and there will be hell to pay because you stop everything. If you wander into the landing area when you're not supposed to be there, and you'll screw up the whole landing cycle.
The cycle, as it's called, can get frenetic. While catapults shoot planes off one end of the deck, cables simultaneously trap planes at the other end. Meanwhile, ground crews position more aircraft for takeoffs, while other crews clear the runways for more landings. It's a place ripe with opportunities for catastrophe.
Anything that can happen with an aircraft mishap has happened on the carrier.
So these sailors really have to keep their head on a swivel, as we say, to keep a lookout. Because an aircraft who turns his exhaust on you, it could blow you over the side.
I've seen someone thrown about 40 feet by a Tomcat turning around behind him and they didn't see it turn.
The potential for danger gets even worse at night.
There's aircraft taxiing around the flight deck at night. Just because it's dark, there's not a lot of visibility. You don't have a lot of situational awareness.
Spinning propellers, like on the Hawkeyes or on the CODs and the C2s, you can't really see them that well, so if you're not paying attention, people have walked into them, especially at night. So it's just one of those things you just got to look out for.
To me, the number one thing that scares me is a guy hitting the ramp at night because it would create a humongous fireball that would then just spread right down the LA, possibly hitting other aircraft and then the folks on board.
I would say, I'd like to say it gets better with the more landings you have, but it doesn't. But at nighttime, you don't find too many guys that go, oh yeah, that was fun, let's do that again.
When bad weather meets rough seas, it takes the danger level substantially higher.
The deck's moving up at you at 15 feet and you're coming down. They can get pretty scary.
When the weather gets snotty, when you can't see the bow from the stern of the ship, you got horizontal rain coming down, and it can get extremely dangerous up there. People slipping and sliding, hats coming off, gloves coming off, stuff rolling down the landing area that can potentially FOD an airplane.
Did he say FOD an airplane?
Stuff rolling down the LA, the landing area, that can potentially FOD an airplane.
To clarify, FOD stands for Foreign Object Debris. A jet blast can turn FOD into a dangerous projectile that could injure people on deck. FOD can get stuck in arresting cables, landing gear, or catapults. It's a major no-no on a carrier flight deck. The Navy takes it so seriously that periodic FOD walks are conducted throughout the day when flight operations are down. During a FOD walk, hundreds of sailors, officers included, methodically scour the 2-hectare flight deck from end to end, looking for the tiniest of debris. When operating in the dangerous mayhem of a flight deck, even the smallest details are a big deal. But biggest of all deals is the Reagan itself. Its flight deck is the proverbial pyramid's peak, a compilation of details that combine to make up the newest wonder of the sea. Plainly stated, the USS Ronald Reagan is one big bad boat. The USS Ronald Reagan, an iron fist designed to get a grip on a situation before it gets out of hand. Tactical Officer Lieutenant Kevin Rubel.
Things that we can do to power projection that we can bring to any shore at any time helps, I think, in a whole, keeps the United States a lot safer.
That power projection is possible thanks in large part to the clearly defined roles of the people involved.
Where are we on here?
Captain Jim Simons is the commanding officer of the ship.
Whereas this is a very complex enterprise in total, each part of it needs to be broken down to a very simplistic and very easily followed set of procedures and rules.
One way they simplify procedures on the flight deck is with a color-coded dress code. Here's the laundry list. Yellows handle the direct movement of aircraft. Greens deal with the catapults and arresting wires. Purples fuel the planes. Browns monitor the planes. Blues pull the planes and chain the planes down. Reds handle weapons and ammunition. They also deal with aircraft crashes and fires. And white shirts handle safety-related jobs like inspections. If you're colorblind, forget about getting a job on an aircraft carrier flight deck.
That is sort of the elegance of the whole thing, that we have in each one of those different integrated areas a fairly simple set of guidelines, fairly straightforward, something we can train to simply and that they can follow and repeat it over and over again and make sure we do it safely.
Operating safely on the flight deck is a must, as the USS Ronald Reagan is put to the test to see if it's up to the task of fully fledged military service. Said another way, it's time for flight deck certification. Not many camera crews have had this experience. We're about to observe a critical part of this mega ship's sea preparations. For some of the sailors, like mini-boss Thomas Quinn, who've been assigned to the Reagan since it was under construction, flight deck certification is a major milestone.
I'll just be proud of the Air Department and all the work we put in to get flight deck certified. It's just a lot of hard work.
In order to get the flight deck certified, a visiting authority hovers close by, evaluating performances.
We have a handling team from our bosses out at Naval Air Forces Pacific in San Diego.
This handling team, known as AirPac, represents the Pacific Fleet, where the Reagan will be in service. According to Aircraft Launch and Recovery Officer Lieutenant Commander Joe Stodd, it's an exciting yet nerve-wracking experience.
They're watching the Air Department perform both procedures and our safety concerns. And once they're satisfied that we're doing things right, they'll give us the go to launch and recover aircraft.
For Air Boss William T. Cooney, who oversees flight operations, this is a big day.
Once we're certified, that means that we're cleared to operate on the carrier normally in any type of environment.
To obtain flight deck certification, the Reagan's crew members must respond to some worst-case scenarios.
The flight deck crew is pretty pumped up, ready to go, and hopefully our drills will go smooth.
The first scenario, an arresting cable is down and must be swapped out.
Here goes, let's change to one wire, change to one wire.
We'll be switching out a cross-deck pendant. If the arresting gear engine or the wire were to fail in any way, we'd have to remove that from the flight deck so the aircraft can continue to land. So our ABEs, our aviation bosun's mates, are timed on how quickly they can go out and remove one of the cross-deck pendants and replace it with a good one.
A minute 46 adds up to one successful drill down.
The next drill is the barricade drill.
The barricade is essentially a giant net designed to catch planes in emergency landing situations. If in trouble, it's pretty much the pilot's only hope of saving his plane. Crews attach the net to giant hydraulic arms that serve as uprights for the barricade.
We have to get it done in a certain amount of time, and the barricade has to be rigged properly and at the right height.
With a successful time of 3 minutes and 44 seconds, the barricade drill is checked off the list. Next up, initiating a fire drill.
We'll simulate that aircraft landed with a problem and then caught on fire. And then our flight deck crew will approach that aircraft get the fire hoses out, and simulate that we're fighting a fire.
Because the potential for catastrophe is so high on a carrier, the Reagan is outfitted with enormous firefighting potential. Here, the flight deck washdown system is being tried out. This is where the entire 2-hectare surface is doused with about 80,000 litres of water per minute. The Reagan's flight deck is also peppered with strategically placed AFFF stations. AFFF stands for aqueous film forming foam, which effectively smothers Class A and B fires. The washdown system in combination with the AFFF makes for efficient and effective firefighting.
The carrier's cut up into 20 zones, so you see where the fire is, you know what zone that's in. You push a button, and then you hit fire, and the AFFF will come up from the flight deck and put the fire out.
The crews appear to be working through the scenarios with proficient skill. Stern nods of approval from Airpac are encouraging, but what happens up here is not the only thing that matters when ensuring that this carrier is fit for service. This deck is a major tool in big-picture military tactics. Below decks, in combat engineering, the elements of that big picture are gathered. In simple terms, combat engineering serves as the eyes of the ship. They have a direct line to the data that comes in via the radar, radio, and satellite antennae.
We're the ones that are looking out 5, 10, 20, 200, 500 miles in between, trying to safely navigate, look for surface threats on the surface or below the surface, and look at the air way out 2, 3, 4, 500 miles.
Back up on the flight deck, as certification drills wrap up with another victory in the fire drill scenario, the Airpac Authority has determined that the crew of the Reagan has made the grade. The flight deck is ready to do what it was built to do. The crew members are poised to put their skills to the ultimate test. Pilots stand ready to put their faith in the Reagan's catapults and arresting cables. And the USS Ronald Reagan is one step closer to being a fully fledged in-service aircraft carrier for the United States Navy. The USS Ronald Reagan stands at the pinnacle of supercarrier technology. It was built with the idea that it will be in service for 50 years. That means that if you're just now graduating high school, this thing could still be in active duty when you're retired. Before we get into what makes the Reagan unique, let's take a look at the typical anatomy of an aircraft carrier. The island is the tower above the deck where they steer the ship, control the air traffic, and monitor flight deck activity. The island also houses radar and communications equipment. The flight deck is obviously where planes take off and land. Below decks, the hangar bay is the parking area for aircraft that are not in use. Living quarters, dining areas, propulsion systems, power plants, everything it takes to maintain this floating airstrip is dispersed throughout the lower decks. As the US Navy's newest aircraft carrier, the Reagan is a shining example of mega shipbuilding, and you don't erect a structure of this magnitude overnight.
It was a gigantic engineering feat to build this ship and all the others like it.
Construction of the Reagan began at Northrop Grumman Newport News in Virginia. A shipyard is basically grown-ups playing with grown-up-sized building blocks. Massive sections of the ship are prefabricated, then huge cranes lower them into a dry dock where they're welded together into a ship. The act of putting the first prefabricated section of ship into the dry dock is ceremoniously referred to as keel laying. For the Reagan, it marked the beginning of a 5-year building process.
From the time the contract is let to Northrop Grumman Newport News, obviously there's a long construction process over there. The ship started to come alive a bit with crew members before the ship was even out of the dry dock.
The crew members assigned to the ship before it was ever in service are known as plank owners.
You have to realize that we have a lot of folks on this ship that have been on the ship for a couple of years, and they were here during the pre-commissioning days when really the focus of the ship was just building the ship. Something different than most of these sailors are trained to do, something totally out of the ordinary.
The plank owners were there to find efficient ways for the Navy to utilize the ship's spaces, In the later phases of the build, plank owners actually outfitted the Reagan with many of its fixtures.
In the last year, a good number of their challenges for the crew and for the shipyard were to finally make the ship habitable so that the crew could actually move aboard and live on board.
As a Nimitz-class carrier, the Reagan's basic design has changed very little from that of the first Nimitz-class carrier built back in 1975. And while there are no drastic eye-catching modifications, the ones that do exist set the Reagan apart as a very effective war machine. Starting at the top, the Reagan's island is the first major design change in US Navy islands since the 1960s. It was actually built with a lot of unused extra space so that it would have room to house unforeseeable technologies of the future. Who knows what they're going to need in half a century? The new island also provides better functionality for the people on board.
We added a lot more space behind the captain's chair, and that will allow our conning officers to get a better idea and a better picture of what's going on in flight operations as opposed to the other bridges.
One of the most significant modifications to the Nimitz design is below the waterline.
One of the main modifications is bulbous bow. It's a feature on many ships throughout the world. We put that on this carrier so that the bow of the ship would be a little more buoyant. And of course, for launching and recovering airplanes, especially launching, we need to make sure that that bow wants to spend a lot of time up level with the horizon in a pitching deck scenario. So the bulbous bow gives us a little more of that buoyancy. Because it's a little longer, it gives us a little bit extra speed at each bell setting as well.
So the Reagan has some prime capabilities, but a lot of that potential is not known until the ship is put through a battery of tests, known as shakedown procedures.
And you just run the ship through its paces. You run it hard, a lot of flying going on, and you just exercise the ship and kind of shake it up to see what's working, what's not working.
Executive Officer Andres Brugal keeps his thumb on the pulse of everything that happens on the Reagan.
When she first went out, we were checking to make sure that everything that was installed correctly and that the ship was put together correctly. Sea trials is what they call it.
Sea trials, an important part of shakedown procedures, involves taking the ship out and pushing her limits to see how she holds up.
We have a very aggressive captain. He likes to drive the ship to the limits that the ship was built to. Just when we were out last week, the captain got the ship up close to her maximum speed, and he put the rudder hard over. And this flight deck that you see right now, all straight, tilts over about 12, 15 degrees. When you've got 300 feet of flight deck at a 15-degree angle, it is an impressive sight.
The Reagan has held up to the intense pounding of sea trials. Now, crew members must work out the kinks. This is done through the rote repetition of drills.
What's that running down your back? What are we?
It's Sammy Over's job to keep his staff on the ready. While these bombs are dummies, the crew treats them like the real deal. And they know time is of the essence in a battle scenario. When it comes to handling explosives, the crew must be willing to stake their name on it, literally.
What my QA is doing over there, he's signing his name, putting a date, the event number is telling them that he looked at this weapon at this time, on this date, it's for this particular event, so it is ready to go.
Right.
So on target all the time.
Right.
While ordnance personnel refine their duties below decks, another procedure is being tackled: taking on jet fuel while at sea. To load fuel, lines are shot to a fuel craft that moves in tandem with the carrier. Those lines are used to move giant hoses across to the ship where the fuel is pumped in. When its tanks are topped off at full capacity, the Reagan can hold a lot of jet fuel.
We'll take on 3 million gallons of fuel, which we don't use for the ship itself. We use it for all the airplanes that are embarked.
That's enough petrol for an economy car to make about 4,200 trips around the world. Storing over 11 million litres of jet fuel poses a challenge all of its own. Way below decks, in the belly of the beast, is where the storage and distribution of that jet fuel is monitored.
So right about now, I'm sitting under the seat. Water is over my head. We're deep down here. So it was scary at first, but I got used to it now, so it ain't nothing to it.
A massive network of pipes and valves are used in the dynamic distribution of fuel throughout various storage facilities on the ship. What would happen if they didn't evenly distribute the jet fuel throughout the carrier?
You'll be leaning like this, and you'll notice, I haven't seen it before, you're on the flight deck, you'll be walking one way, so it's very important that we keep it balanced out.
Managing an 88,000 metric ton saltwater splitting weapon is a balancing act of staggering proportions. Whether it's the distribution of 11 million litres of jet fuel, the torpedo-like behaviour of a 635 metric ton bulbous bow, or the ongoing awareness and readiness of its thousands of sailors, the Reagan, from every perspective, is a force to be reckoned with. The USS Ronald Reagan. Its open-air flight deck cutting through the Atlantic stands in stark contrast to what's going on just below the surface. What lies beneath are the lower decks and a maze of steely corridors. For these sailors, this massive maze is not only something they need to maneuver in, it happens to be their home. Imagine this. You're living with 6,000 other people in this claustrophobic mangle of spaces for months at a time, with nowhere else to go. When it comes to handling the day-to-day dealings with sailors aboard the Reagan, Command Master Chief Kathy Hansen is there with ongoing guidance.
When I came in the Navy, I was 18, a punk, and I came in the Navy for direction, and now I can help other sailors, achieve what I've achieved, and it's an awesome thing. People come from all walks of life, so sometimes they have financial problems, sometimes to be away from their kids or to be away from their husband or their wife is very difficult, so we help them get through that.
So what is the Reagan like as a home away from home? Well, for one thing, space is at a premium. This female berthing is typical of most of the Reagan's living quarters. A tour of this place is a tutorial in tidiness.
This is the coffin locker right here. This is a space that's given to you out to sea for your locker. And you see how you have to fold things a certain way to make sure your uniforms fit in here.
Keeping clothes tightly pressed and folded is a necessity, given the limited storage space. And the officers keep sailors on their toes.
There's a list that they give you. And when they do inspection, they have to make sure that you don't have anything you're not supposed to have in your locker. And they do it by surprise. They don't tell you. So it's always a surprise when you have it.
Living in cramped quarters isn't the only unique life experience on the Reagan. The use of cash is strictly prohibited. Before shipping out, sailors buy points that are registered to an ATM-like card. But there are also familiar aspects to life. People need haircuts, the Reagan has barbershops. People have faith, the Reagan has 3 chapels. If you have some errands, there are 2 onboard convenience stores. If you want to burn some calories or buff up, there's a gym. And for that good old snail mail, there's always the post office. If you're out of stamps, don't forget that Navy cash.
Thank you.
The Reagan is constantly abuzz with the activity of off-duty sailors living out their regular daily routines. But supporting the regular routines of so many people is a huge undertaking. Just take the laundry, for instance. Most of the people on board work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. When the Reagan's operating with a full crew of 6,000, that makes for a boatload of sweaty uniforms. Add to that the 28,000 bed sheets and the 14,000 pillowcases, and you wind up with one humongous load of laundry coming down every day. Altogether, these machines can turn out nearly 5 metric tons of laundry a day. But only the bigwigs' clothes make it to the ironing boards.
We iron khakis, which is officers and chiefs' uniforms.
For the people who work here, there's a definite sense of pressure to pull off the perfect press.
Especially if it's the captain or the executive officers. We make sure that they look squared away. They don't look right. We're all embarrassed.
It may get hot down here, and the people on duty may have to endure their shipmates' dirty socks, but laundry service is closed on Sundays, meaning these people only have to work 6 days a week. That's easy living on the Reagan. For the people who live on an aircraft carrier, one of the very few guilty pleasures is a good meal. Tremel Hoover is the galley captain, meaning he's in charge of all of the Reagan's kitchens.
Food is the #1 morale on board. I mean, when you guys are flying the planes and they might have a bad day and different things like that, they know they can come down here and get 100% quality, 100% service.
On the Reagan, operating at 100% means having an open kitchen door policy.
We're running 23 hours a day. 23 hours a day now. We're one of the only ships that are actually doing that now. Constant feed. We only shut down maybe 1 hour for cleaning.
This ship has a total of 11 different rooms for storing food. 7 are for dry storage, meaning no refrigeration, and the others are for cold storage. Down here, if nobody's looking, there are some definite benefits. Altogether, the Reagan has the capacity to store enough food to keep 6,000 sailors happily fed for up to 3 months.
When you have a happy crew, you have a happy ship. You know, everything is happy. Everything runs smooth. We take a lot of positive input from the crew, and whatever they want, that's what we give them.
Giving the customer what they want? That sounds like private sector stuff, which is exactly the point here. The people who work in these kitchens are no longer called mess management specialists. They're known as culinary specialists, something new to the Navy. They are now given the same credentials as their civilian counterparts. Because there's an open kitchen, it's hard to count, but official estimates are that when the Reagan is at full capacity, over 18,000 meals are served every day. All of that chowing can lead to plenty of trash, from bones to napkins. Those things don't just disappear. It's a city of 6,000 and no landfills to speak of. Patrick Maynard runs one of 5 solid waste plants, and he says when it comes to trash, the Reagan's crew keeps it coming.
Actually, it's pretty consistent. We're constantly having trash coming in. 24 hours a day we have trash coming in.
It takes a variety of machines to break down different types of garbage.
Anything such as clothing, wood, anything of that nature gets put into this incinerator.
Here, the contents are cooked to 660 degrees Celsius. Then the ashes are discarded overboard. But extreme heat isn't the only way to break down garbage. A saltwater bath also does the trick in prepping certain materials to walk the plank.
Anything that can be broken down by salt water, such as paper, food, anything of that nature, gets put into what we call the pulper. It gets put into the machine. Machine rotates inside, breaks all the particles down, and sends it overboard.
For environmental reasons, plastic materials can't be tossed overboard, so this machine is used to compress it into more storable units.
And it turns it into, basically, looks like a hockey puck, a big hockey puck.
Come out just like this, fully compressed and melted.
These hockey pucks are eventually transported to land-based disposal sites. It may seem like dirty work, but what happens down here is what keeps the Reagan clean. So is there any hope for a nightlife on this city at sea? Welcome to the hangar bay. This 7,000 square metre aeroplane parking lot doubles as a town square of sorts. The eerily coloured lights are not for ambience. They make it hard for enemies to spot the ship at night. But the people who gather here aren't thinking about keeping a low profile. They're ready to blow off some steam. From karaoke, to sumo wrestling, to self-defense classes, the hangar bay is like a giant park, minus the pigeons. From the nightlife in the city centre of the hangar bay, to the daily grind of the thousands of workers who sustain this ship's massive population, it's all evidence that the Reagan is its own city at sea, and then some.
Everything that you can imagine in a city, we have on board this ship. The only thing is, our mission is to protect the United States.
Things are about to get interesting on the flight deck of the USS Ronald Reagan. The airpack handling team, here to give the Reagan the go-ahead to launch and recover airplanes, has seen the crew run drills without any actual planes. Now playtime is over. It's time to get real.
We want airplanes on board because what we do is shoot and catch aircraft.
It's time for flight operations, better known as flight ops. These exercises will give the Reagan further levels of flight deck certification.
What I really do is enjoy the show.
Even the ship's commanding officer is on the edge of his seat, or should we say throne, for this performance.
The air boss up in primary flight control will have the task of trying to keep what we call the pattern full of airplanes so that they can come around and get as many landings as they can. We'll land them, taxi them up to the catapult, launch them again, and we'll have 4 to 6 airplanes circling around in the landing configuration, coming around to land, and we'll be doing that all day long.
William T. Cooney is the main man running this reality check.
My job as air boss is just to make sure the safe and prompt execution of the airplane and getting aircraft on and off the carrier safely.
Cooney's right-hand man is Thomas Quinn.
The air officer or the air boss is in charge. I'm his #1 assistant. The assistant air officer, they call me the mini boss. So I'm really looking at Cats 1 and 2. The air boss is taking care of Cats 3 and 4 and the landings.
Cats are the Navy's term for catapults.
So the boss and I, our heads are on a swivel all the time, and you'll hear me over the 5MC yelling, and all I'm trying to do is make sure our young folks are focused, because it's a dangerous place. And if they can stay focused, we'll get the job done.
These flight ops involve landing aircraft at the back of the ship, while others are being shot off the front. The only way to make sure everyone hits their cue is to have a stack of planes moving in and out of position in timed perfection. Lieutenant Dennis Mitchell is the guy who keeps everyone in line, which is especially challenging with a whole new crew on a whole new ship.
But right now, the hardest part is just getting everyone up to the speed that they need to be to get them to that mission cruise status.
His primary tool for keeping his rather large and powerful ducks in a row is this. They call it the Ouija board.
It's a direct replica of the flight deck outside. Everywhere you see aircraft on the Ouija board is where they are out on the flight deck. And that tells the handler what the status of each aircraft is, what the location of each aircraft is.
While the handler keeps his thumb on the pulse of flight deck activity, the people who steer the Reagan must focus on the position of the ship itself.
Our airport is moving, so we also have to have very good coordination with the bridge team. These folks that you see behind me here, the officer of the deck, the conning officer, who are giving orders to the helmsman to make sure that we keep the wind in the proper aspect over the flight deck, and we keep the proper speed up to make sure that that wind is, the relative wind is a certain speed.
By taking off into the wind, the plane gets more lift, and the pilots get a rise of their own.
First time I got shot off, I screamed like a little girl, I won't lie to you. It was thrilling.
You know, you go from 0 to, is it 120 in right around a second or two.
The best part of my job is the catch shot. You're not looking at anything else except you're looking long, you're looking at the water, you know you're going to go flying, you get yourself ready to go, they give you tension, you go full throttle, you know your engines spool up, and your jet has a nice little squat, you just get ready to go, and then the guy touches the deck, you roll your head back, you get your arms forward, and you get this incredible adrenaline rush right off the bat. It's from 0 to about 128 knots in literally 2.5 seconds, and it's just a kick butt time. It's fun, it's incredible. It's the best roller coaster ride in the world.
When it comes to landing on the Reagan, the pilots have a new challenge that comes along with this impressive new ship.
Ronald Reagan's unique in some effects that we have 3 arresting gear wire. All the other carriers have 4.
So what does one less wire really mean? For these pilots, apparently it's no big deal.
It's 3 wires though, it's the same landing box, and you fly your approach exactly the same. You never stare at the wires when you come down. You're always looking at the optical lens.
When I come in, I'm looking at 2 needles that'll sit like this on my HSI. It's a screen I got in front of me. And my job as a pilot is to keep those needles dead center to within a gnat's ass. And plus or minus, looking for a glide slope, left to right, looking for lineup.
When a pilot keeps his plane locked onto those crosshairs, he effectively flies through a small window, like a strike zone for a baseball pitch. If they're in the zone, they nail the landing.
It can get very hairy, and it all happens within about 17 seconds as you show up at the start of the glide slope to when you touch down. So you got about that much time to figure it out and make sure your suitcase is right on center line.
You can practice as much as you want on an 8,000-foot runway, but there's no substitution for the real thing. Simulator or practice landing on a runway can't nearly duplicate what this is like. Nothing can.
As a part of this day's training exercises, a lot of the pilots are executing touch and goes.
Touch and go is when the hook's up and you don't stop. It's still a graded pass, much as a trap would be, same standards.
Sometimes what looks like a touch and go is actually a bad landing. They call this a bolt.
Bolter's when you miss all the wires and go around because you're too high, too fast, or you're just not on your game. A little bit embarrassing, sure, but everybody gets one now and then. Usually, when you get bolter, they hang a big bolt over your chair. We don't have the bolt with us, but I'm sure it'll be here shortly.
These flight exercises are not only about pilots brushing up on their skills. Everyone out here is having their stamina put to the test.
What they're going to do is just come out. We're going to fly non-stop from about 2 o'clock in the afternoon till about 2 o'clock in the morning. So it'll be 12 hours of straight flying.
As the sky darkens, the ship is barely lit. The Reagan's lights are kept to a minimum so enemies can't easily spot it. This has the added effect of forcing the pilots to fly blind.
You know, out there when you start at 10 miles, you don't even see this ship. You might see a light on the horizon in the water, but that's about all you see. You can't tell what it is or what you're driving at.
It is extremely dark. I don't think there's any place more dark than being at sea with no moon out, or underneath a cloud cover with a moon on top. And it makes it very, very challenging for a pilot when you have no horizon reference, when you're flying only off your instruments and the few lights that you have in front of you which outline the ship.
Over at the front of the ship is a place known as the bubble.
Man's out, with a thumb, pass, boom, military power.
Here, the catapult operator keeps a low profile as he shoots plane after plane into the night sky.
In the throat. Don't take it, sir. Don't take it.
Shooting airplanes is a matter of balancing a litany of variables. The catapult operator must consider the weight of the aircraft, the density of the air, the headwind, and the movement of the ship through the water. Once everything is in place, he hits the button. When it's all said and done, this is what it's all about on an aircraft carrier. The Reagan was built to shoot and trap airplanes, and now, finally, it's certified to go into service. The next step, leave Norfolk Naval Station in Norfolk, Virginia, and take a 2-month journey around the tip of South America to its home port in San Diego, California.
The ship is too large to go through the Panama Canal, so we have to go all the way south around Cape Horn.
The USS Ronald Reagan, the newest show of force for the US Navy. For Commanding Officer Simons, command of this floating fortress is an honor of magnificent proportions.
There are only 10 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and in the life of all those aircraft carriers, less officers have commanded them than people who have gone into space. I say to people all the time that I have to be one of the luckiest people in the Navy, maybe in the entire world.
And while this megastructure has a personality all its own, for many, the collective personality of the people who serve here is what makes the Reagan the pride of the US Navy fleet.
And the thing that keeps me coming to work every day with a smile on my face is the people on this ship. You cannot help but be proud. And that's it for me. That's what makes this ship great, is the Ronald Reagan sailor.
For the Ronald Reagan sailor, news of the president's recent passing makes this journey to a new home and a new beginning even more significant. The men and women who serve here take this voyage not knowing what will happen after they dock in San Diego. What they do know is that they've made the grade, and that no matter where they're sent, they stand ready to handle the awesome power of the USS Ronald Reagan.